September 26, 2022, a few months after the start of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, 3 of the 4 lines of the functioning Nordstream pipeline, designed to transport natural gas from Russia to Germany, were destroyed at a depth of about 80 meters at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. The construction agreement was concluded without the involvement of transit countries, such as Poland. One of the suspects in the Nord Stream bombing is 49-year-old Volodymyr Z, who lived in Poland. The man claims he had nothing to do with the attack. Volodymyr Z was arrested on September 30th by decision of the district court in Warsaw. He has been held in the remand center since October 1st. On October 6th, the court extended his detention until November 9th, reducing its length from the requested 100 days to 40. The prosecutor requested an extension of the pre-trial detention for a period of 100 days, but the court decided to extend the pre-trial detention for 40 days. The most important decision in this case will be made on Friday at 11 a.m. before the court in Warsaw. Tomorrow, the court will hear Germany's request for the extradition of Mr. Volodymyr for the first time. At this stage, anything is possible. An important factor is the decisions that are made at the political level. As soon as the opposition proposed the so-called amnesty bill, the case of Volodymyr Z suddenly accelerated. The provisions are intended to protect Poles who decide to join the fight on the side of Ukraine against the Russian invasion, but without the consent of the Polish authorities. Last week, it was proposed that the amnesty should cover not only Polish citizens, but everyone. Paweł Jabłoński from Law and Justice spoke about this yesterday. If it weren't for political actions, if they hadn't blocked the committee, there would be a ban on extradition, but they deliberately stopped it today. Tomorrow, a subcommittee was to meet on this matter. Suddenly, this committee is cancelled, and on Friday, he will have an extradition trial. The Polish Sejm's Defense and Justice committees referred the bill for further work. The issue was to be discussed at today's joint subcommittee meeting. However, for unexplained reasons, the meeting was cancelled. Donald Tusk is trying to relinquish political responsibility and shift the burden of this case onto the justice system. This is, of course, a court decision. As you know, there is a European arrest warrant issued by Germany, and this is a decision of the Polish court. But our position has not changed in the interests of Poland and in the interests of common decency and justice. It is certainly not to accuse or hand over this citizen to another country. The case has international significance. It will either end in favor of the enemies of Russian imperialism or in favor of Germany. The detention of a Ukrainian citizen accused by the German authorities of destroying the Nord Stream pipelines was also commented on by the head of the Polish National Security Bureau, Professor Sławomir Cęckiewicz, in an interview with the Financial Times. If Germany is prosecuting someone who destroyed a source of income for the Russian war machine, then the conflict of interest between Poland and Germany is clear, especially in terms of how they perceive the reality after the Russian invasion in 2022, said Cęckiewicz. In the context of tomorrow's trial of Volodymyr Z before the Warsaw court, the information provided by the Italian media is sensational. The Italian Supreme Court has rejected the request to extradite the Ukrainian to Germany. This concerns a second Ukrainian citizen, Serhii K., who was arrested in Italy in August, also on suspicion of blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. This shows which country is exercising its sovereignty and is able to stand up to Germany. It is worth noting that Germany is demanding the extradition of suspects, not perpetrators. Regardless of who destroyed the infrastructure, the Russian war machine has lost an important source of financial support. The agreement between Germany and Russia was contrary to the interests of many European Union countries and also to what is important for Poland. In this way, Germany unfairly gained a huge advantage over other European economies, using the European market for a kind of conquest to dominate it with German production, which, thanks to cheap energy supplies from Russia, was not to have any effective competition. In turn, Russia gained the ability to use energy as blackmail, which destabilized European markets when the war broke out in Ukraine. Gazprom treated its customers unfairly, and Nord Stream 2 gave it even greater influence in the heart of Europe. This influence also extended to Germany, as the country painfully discovered during the energy crisis, when the Russians also turned off the gas tap to Germany, and the whole of Europe suffered the consequences of its tragic dependence on Russian gas. Russia accused the United States and Ukraine of organizing the attack, which both the US and Ukraine denied. So far, it has not been proven that either of these countries had a hand in the incident. Only Germany and Russia maintain this narrative.
Raw material autonomy. It sounds like a slogan from a Brussels report, but in fact it is a question of our survival. Experts say bluntly that the European Union's policy is depriving itself of the opportunities for development. Instead of investing in minds and technologies, it prefers to believe in myths about green transformation. We're in a critical situation. The Chinese have said that they want to subjugate the world. They have already done so by suspending exports for the processing of rare, strategic and critical raw materials, on which the entire green economy is built. While China has been buying up global deposits for 2 decades, securing supply chains and even controlling smelters in Africa, Europe, with a smile and pride, signs more climate pacts. The result? Without critical raw materials, we will not even be able to use the American technologies offered to us by our alliance with America and NATO. Experts compare it to getting a modern engine and not having the fuel to run it. The EU's policy is simply suicidal. And when we say that climatism is a religion, unfortunately, it has very specific impact on the economy and the functioning of the EU. It is not just the madness of people who glue themselves to roads, but specific decisions made by EU politicians. The situation in Poland is equally worrying. Instead of our own economic policy, we have orders from Brussels which, under the banner of green transformation, are leading to the destruction of our industrial potential. This can clearly be seen in the example of Jastrzębska Spółka Węglowa. The situation today is dramatic. I am shocked by what is happening there because it is a world leader in the extraction of coking coal for steel production. I don't know whether someone wants to weaken JSW's position on the market. Michal Rahon spoke today with Declan Ganley, an Irish entrepreneur who has been warning for years against federalism and centralisation in the EU, against its blindness to national and economic interests, about sovereignty, economic, political and civilizational. We have a crisis in the EU, a crisis of migration, identity, sovereignty, freedom of speech. It's hard to say what crisis we don't have, including the crisis of the euro as a currency. The businessman says bluntly, today it is no longer just about politics. It is about the security of civilization. In one interview, he revealed that all communications sent via Wi-Fi on an aeroplane, messages, logins, data, is intercepted by the Chinese government when the plane flies over Chinese territory.
When you're flying over China, all your emails, your WhatsApps, your everything are going up from that satellite terminal on the aircraft to a satellite, a commercial satellite, that's not the Internet, is being landed in a Chinese ground gateway, and everything is being intercepted.
He also talked about this in an interview with TV Republica. If someone decided to attack Taiwan today, for example, the consequences would be catastrophic. One cyber attack would be enough to shut down the world. Phones, the internet, banks, television, everything would stop working. The risk that the Kremlin, Beijing, and even non-state actors will strike the internet is enormous. The arteries of the internet are about 500 undersea cables. That's a large number on a global scale. States such as Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are capable of striking it, and we can see this in the Baltic Sea. Chinese vessels deliberately cut the cables. There are many such cases. In this situation, we could be shut down if a global crisis were to occur. This is a huge threat. Therefore, to present this, a businessman created the Outernet project, an alternative network that does not use the classic internet. It communicates exclusively between satellites, without contact with a network vulnerable to attacks by China or Russia. It cannot be shut down like that because it does not connect to the internet. So let's take the Baltic Sea, for example. We have seen ships dragging anchors in order to cut cables. You don't need any space-age technology for this. All you need is a chain and an anchor. That will do it. There are even simpler methods. It's not difficult to damage, and if you cut it in several places, the sea currents will move the sections and repair becomes complicated. For very little money, with millions of kilometers of cables, you can simply shut down the internet. The businessman is blunt. It's not just a question of technology, it's a war for our freedom. Whoever controls the flow of information controls the world. The United States will take the necessary steps to make Russia bear the costs of its continued aggression. These are the words of the United States Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who sent Russia an unequivocal ultimatum during a meeting with representatives of NATO member countries. Washington is taking a tougher stance towards Russia. Either end the war or face economic and military pressure. In response, the Kremlin launched another massive attack on Ukraine. Tomorrow, the Ukrainian president will meet the United States president in Washington, where the issue of the White House's consent to the purchase of American long-range missiles will be raised. Not a night goes by without attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. There is no region of Ukraine that is not threatened by such attacks. Power and gas outages occur in every district. These are purely terrorist attacks, say representatives of the Ukrainian authorities. Today, here within the walls of the British Parliament, I ask you, our dear British colleagues, to initiate a debate and take decisions to recognise Russia as a terrorist state. Because terror is its true nature. Because Russia will not change unless we force it to. The increased pressure just announced by the Americans may help force Russia to make peace. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has presented the Kremlin with an ultimatum. What does this mean? According to analysts, it's a preview of America's very clear stance in the event of a failure of diplomatic efforts to end the war. The Secretary of State may be indirectly referring to support for Ukraine, not only through the imposition of further sanctions on Russia, but also through the supply of weapons such as Tomahawk long-range missiles. Both soldiers on the front lines and analysts agree that Tomahawks in the hands of Ukrainians, even with limited capabilities to strike targets deep inside Russia, would be a real game changer. If they find the right use for the Tomahawks, I think a lot will change. If they are used against the right targets, I think it will affect the situation. During the continuing war, both sides have adapted to the conditions on the front lines and in the rear. Ukraine's growing potential, along with successive deliveries of modern weapons, has forced the Russians to respond by stretching their supply lines beyond the range of, for example, the HIMARS missiles. Tomahawks, however, are in a completely different league. Depending on the variant, the Tomahawk has a range of up to 2,500 kilometers. This means that if the missiles were to find their way into Ukraine's arsenal, Russia would have to relocate its bases and military airfields beyond the Urals. This is because the Engels II air base in the Saratov region, from which Russia sends strategic bombers to attack targets in Ukraine, would be within Kiev's strike range. Kiev would also be able to reach the Shahed drone factory in Yelabuga, and even the Northern Fleet base in Murmansk. Possible approval for Ukraine to acquire Tomahawks is to be the subject of talks between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. The meeting is scheduled to take place tomorrow at the White House. Donald Trump told the media that Ukraine is planning to go on the offensive, and that the time has come for Washington to make important decisions in this regard.